All right, thanks, Jared. I appreciate that introduction. I appreciate the time afforded to me today. And kudos to the planning committee for putting this presentation at this point in time this morning. I'm sitting here in my chair kind of thinking about how this presentation fits so well kind of at the end of these presentations we've had already this morning. So my name is Cody Rhoden. I'm the chair of the training committee for the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council. I'm also the habitat implementation coordinator for the National Bobwhite and Grassland Initiative. And the stuff I'm going to be going over today was stuff that we did when I was the small game program coordinator for Kentucky Fish and Wildlife. And so I guess, the point of this presentation, or what I hope you all might get from it, is I'm going to get really specific about how in Kentucky we try to address some of the roadblocks, like a lot of the roadblocks we've already talked about today. And so, my hope is you might be able to get like a tiny fragment of information from this presentation you can take back to your state or your jurisdiction to try to move the ball forward when it comes to prescribed fire on private lands, public lands, and all over the country. All right, so the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council, it's not unlike other prescribed fire councils in the state or in the country. We have a lot of great partner organizations. And essentially, the council was built to provide fire practitioners in the state with information and a place to come to get trained up on prescribed fire. And I take some time here kind of building this up because I do think it's important. We've talked about kind of the summary of other certified burn program managers in other states and other fire councils and prescribed burn associations and stuff like that. So here's kind of Kentucky Prescribed Fire's timeline. So in 2003, the fire law in the state of Kentucky opened up a little bit and allowed state agency practitioners to burn on state-owned property. After that happened, in 2008, the fire practitioners got together and said, hey, all these people can burn now on the state properties, and there's a lot of interest in this. Let's get a group together to talk more about this stuff. At that point, there was a couple of roadblocks identified. One big one was there was not a lot of crew member training in the state outside of NWCG for this prescribed fire that was happening on state properties. And then in 2016, another law was passed, and this law allowed exemptions for individuals that had a certified burn boss authorization. It exempted them and allowed them to burn within Kentucky's burn ban seasons, which run from February to April and October to December. If you know anything about burning in the Mid-South, those two burn ban seasons are about the best you can get as far as ecological burning goes, right? And so the carrot, essentially, in the state of Kentucky to get your certified burn boss certification is you can burn within these burn ban windows. So at that point, the reaction from the council was the first certified burn boss course was established in 2018. And then through a couple other roadblocks I'll talk about more, but our first Learn and Burn was in 2023. And essentially, as you can see, the council was kind of, since its inception, has kind of responded to state law and how the state fire practitioners has been growing in Kentucky. All right, so these are data we're fortunate enough to have a burn portal in the state of Kentucky. And so this is where all the fire practitioners in the state can enter in the acres in which they burn. And so as you can see, we're not hitting like mega numbers, but it's increasing over time, right? And these data, honestly, are only as good as the people that put the data in there. So I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a little bit. But we do have a website, Kentucky Prescribed Fire, kyfire.org. And within that website, we have a burn portal for any fire practitioner to enter in their burns anytime during the year. And so essentially, this is a breakdown of the burners in the state, the certified burners in the state, how many acres they have burned from 2013 to 2025. And as you can see, KDFWR, that's the Fish and Wildlife Agency within the state, they're doing the lion's share of the burning, as this pie graph might represent. But in reality, the U.S. Forest Service, obviously, and the Daniel Boone is putting down the most acreage in the state of Kentucky. They just occasionally forget to put it in the burn portal. Is anybody in here from the Daniel Boone National Forest? Okay, then we're clear. We're clear. But so essentially, it's the state agency, the federal agency, again, not unlike many other states in the country, okay? And so here's some roadblocks that have been identified. Again, not reinventing the wheel here. These are likely a lot of roadblocks that we have in our states for getting prescribed fire on the ground. Limited workforce capacity, low landowner awareness, shortage of certified burn bosses, and liability concerns. These are kind of the four big roadblocks in the state of Kentucky. From essentially 2013 to now, we've done surveys, we've surveyed the fire practitioners, we surveyed the private landowners, we've done a bunch of stuff in the state to come up with these four that kind of everybody knows about, right? But I'm going to go through a little bit and kind of get more specific about how we've addressed these. So the first roadblock, limited workforce capacity. Essentially, this is trained crew members, right? So people that we can have on the fire line that kind of know less than nothing about certified or about prescribed fire. This is essentially the solution to this was to develop a crew member course. This is a basic introduction to prescribed fire and controlled burning. And this is the baseline certification to serve as crew on a Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council burn. And if you're part of the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council, if you're a practitioner in the state, this serves as the bare minimum crew member training. And so this is an 8-hour course. Unfortunately, it's all in class. We take them outside for like 15 or 20 minutes, so it can be brutal, honestly. It's literally 8 hours in a classroom. And it's directed at individuals with little to no fire experience. And so these crew member courses have exploded over the last many years in the state of Kentucky. In 2021, we started with like 30 people had been trained. And again, the training was only developed in 2016. It kind of sat on a shelf for a little bit. And then 2021, we picked it up, and it has exploded over time. As you can see, we have almost 700 mostly private landowners that have gone through this course. So that's huge. We think that we're doing a good job trying to get down the road on these crew member courses. Okay, roadblock number 2, low landowner awareness. And, Wes mentioned this on the prescribed burn associations and stuff, just the power of taking people out and showing them for the first time that prescribed fire. This is what we're trying to get at here. Our solution were these learn and burns, essentially hands-on experience for those that have completed the crew member course. So if you've gone through and completed that 8-hour course, now you're eligible to come out with us and burn with us. And most of these have been on private land, which is very beneficial. Again, you can see kind of, if you've taken this course, you can go out and go onto somebody else's private property and kind of emulate how you would burn your private property. We kind of make a big production out of this. They're very straightforward burns, pretty normal shape, burning in relative humidity or other weather conditions that aren't going to be as risky for slop over our spots. And so, part of our ability to do this, these learn and burns were pretty new to Kentucky Fish and Wildlife and to the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council. And essentially, kind of a reverberating theme in this presentation or what we're able to do in the state of Kentucky is this last bullet, this internal policy change to broaden participation. So essentially for this Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, to have somebody on our line, historically we go out on private landowners' properties and essentially burn it off for them with a crew of Kentucky Fish and Wildlife crew members, right? And even if the landowner wanted to come down to the burn site and interact with us or even watch it, we had to tell them to stay away. You can't even be on the fire line here, right? Because at Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, we had to have NWCG, essentially FFT2, plus a pack test, plus all this other stuff, right? And there was no way that the landowner was, even on their own property, able to see us. So that was years ago. And so through the fire management officer for Kentucky Fish and Wildlife and the division director, they got together and they modified our volunteer waiver, right? So most state fish and wildlife agencies have these volunteer waivers where individuals can come out and help do shocking or whatever, And so they modified that volunteer waiver to allow people to come onto the fire line and at least observe, and even further that if they had this 8-hour course, they can participate in limited capacity. That was huge. And again, these learn and burns have popped off. So we just started doing this, I think in 2022, maybe 2023. And since then, we've done 21 all across the state, had over 200 participants in 19 counties. And essentially, just looking at this map, this has the landowner crew member, that 8-hour crew member course I talked about a little bit earlier in the green counties. And then the crosshatch counties are counties we had learning burns in. And then so we majorly covered the state, east to west, north to south, and at least these 8-hour crew member courses, and we follow in behind with the learn and burn if we're able. Okay, and here's the last one that I'll take probably the rest of my time on here. Yeah, I won't be touching the liability concerns. We'll leave that for other smarter minds. And so, this third roadblock of a shortage of certified burn bosses. So the solution to that was that Kentucky Certified Burn Boss course. And this is a professional level training. It's over 160 hours of class and field work, again, for better or worse, right? So in the state of Kentucky, we've elected to make this really comprehensive. It's a 3-day course. After you do the 3-day workshop, you have to get 3 apprentice burns, in which a task book needs to be filled out appropriately. And the burn bosses develop a burn plan for each burn, which can be, we all know what goes into a burn plan, but essentially it's on this apprentice burn boss at that point to get in and actually act as a burn boss for these 3 apprentice burns. And the prerequisites, as we heard in the previous presentation, there's some prerequisites out there in the States. For us, it was NWCG, kind of FFT2 or equivalent, and a minimum of 5 prescribed or wildfires was the prerequisite. But I'm going to come back to that in a second. And so essentially, here's our pathway in the state of Kentucky to become a certified burn boss. And again, if you become a certified burn boss, you can burn within the burn bands set out by the Kentucky Division of Forestry. And again, those burn bands are like the time in which you want to burn in the state. And so you take the Certified Burn Boss workshop, that's 3 days, and then you get your 3 apprentice burns under a mentor burn boss, and then you're fully certified. And so here's kind of how this has looked since our first class in 2019. And so in 2019, also you see the number trained is kind of the dark green, and the lighter green is the cumulative. In that first year, we had to grandfather a whole bunch of people to actually have some burn bosses to actually teach other people about how to be a burn boss. And so these grandfathered people were individuals that were burning a whole bunch on state properties from the Division of Forestry, the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, essentially the state agency fire practitioners in the state, along with their federal partners. And then essentially they went out and started doing these trainings. So again, this is probably not a great way to represent these data, but this has been increasing over time as well. If you take 2019 out of there, we've been training more and more people every year. And essentially in the beginning, the agencies, like say in 2020, 2021, and probably honestly 2022, 2023, the agencies had a huge backlog of fire practitioners in the state that didn't get grandfathered in, but these people had to be certified as a certified burn boss to go about their daily tasks, say on a wildlife management area, right? Or running a state forest, right? Those people need to be burn bosses. So we didn't broadcast these burn boss courses out to the general public, or even to the people that took those 8-hour courses or landowners that we knew would be interested. We had to keep it narrow so we could field like 30 to 40 people in each one of these classes. And so we did that for many years. And most of those people, most if not all of them, were agency folks, okay? And so in the last couple years, we've opened this up more to contractors in the state, private landowners, managers of hunt clubs, you name it. These people that are more serious than just like a crew member would be. They're serious about getting fire on the ground, and they're able to go and take these courses and get this stuff knocked out. The problem we were having, though, and the problem, honestly, we're still dealing with today, is that around half of the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council certified burn bosses, the trained apprentice burn bosses, around half of them weren't making it fully to certified burn boss, right? So they go in, they take the workshop, and then about half of them would actually go through, get the apprentice burns, and then become a full-blown certified burn boss. And essentially, this is the breakdown, this pie chart. The gray is grandfathered in. Also in the state of Kentucky, if you're NWCG, RXB, any of the RXB series, you're automatically certified as a Kentucky certified burn boss. So that's that lighter green, and then not super dark green, but the next darkest green is the apprentice burn bosses that were trained by the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council, and that dark green is the fully certified burn bosses. And so if we dig down into this a little bit farther, I'm splitting it up here. The people that have taken the workshop, they haven't got their 3 burns yet, but they've taken the workshop, they haven't got their 3 burns yet, so they're not a fully certified burn boss, right? And so I'm splitting them up here between agency folks and non-agency folks. So these people that work for the Division of Forestry, or they work for Fish and Wildlife, or Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, that's here on the right, or the left, sorry. And then on the right is these non-agency folks, the private landowners, the contractors, other people like that, right? And so what we can see here clearly is the non-agency folks are having a harder time getting fully certified. And again, if we step back and think about this as people that want to promote fire in our states, these non-agency people, collectively control a whole lot more of the state of Kentucky than these agency folks, right? It's like 96% in the state of Kentucky. Kentucky's 96% privately owned. And so essentially this was breaking down in these 3 apprentice burns in the process. These people could get to the workshop, they took the workshop, they could not find the roadblocks for these apprentice burns, for these non-agency folks. There was nowhere for them to burn. They were unable to locate a burn boss for mentoring, or there was a timing mismatch, right? And so a lot of these people had other jobs, something like that. Essentially, they weren't being paid to do fire, which, as you can imagine, makes it very difficult to pick up 3 burns to get certified. And so to try to address at least, honestly, all 3 of these, we came up with a plan with the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council to kind of do like a burn university thing, where we're going to find a location in the state where we can take all of these non-agency folks and just run through a whole bunch of burns with them. And so that place ended up being Shaker Village of Pleasant Hill. So this is a privately owned, publicly accessible property in central Kentucky. It was a quail focus area during the quail focus area years of Kentucky Fish and Wildlife. And essentially all this was at one point fescue, and it was reverted to native shortgrass and fords, and all the polygons and stuff you see there. So very burnable stuff. And so this is essentially what this looks like. This had already been broken up into burn units in the past. As an agency, we had helped burn this for many, many, many years. And so we knew the fire breaks are going to be in there. They're going to be nice tilled, wide fire breaks. We knew we had backup water. The volunteer fire department in the county came out. And so they were there to back us and everything. It was a great place to do fire. Okay, I talked a little bit about earlier the internal policy changes and how that helped us move forward here. This was a huge help from the roadblocks to solutions. The old criteria in the state for you to come and burn with us and come and burn with us as a certified burn boss was to be NWCG, essentially FFT2, have a PAC test, and be an employee of KDFWR or have a signed memorandum of agreement with the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council. Right? And so that really excluded pretty much anyone that didn't work for an agency in the state, right? And so the new criteria, again, and I just want to make a quick point here. This is internal policy. This was internal policy for the state of Kentucky, right? For the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. This was our internal policy. There's no state legislation saying you got to have a PAC test to be on the fire line with Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, right? This was our internal policy. And again, the people at Kentucky Fish and Wildlife were able to go in and change this and make it more accessible to these individuals that were really getting hung up in the process, and they were not able to move forward as fire practitioners in the state, and it was largely because of our own guidelines. And so we changed it to make it a little bit easier, make the crew member course +1 learn and burn, allowed you to get in there, and then that signed volunteer waiver. And then the timing mismatch. So essentially I mentioned that we have that burn portal. I took the burn portal data and broke it down into, what month is the #1 month for burning. And in Kentucky, for better or worse, we're doing a whole bunch of burning in March. And we're trying to change that a little bit as a council and fire practitioners in the state. But we burn a bunch in March. and we looked at the burn like the last week in March. So we essentially just said last week in March to all these non-agency folks, be here at Shaker Village during these 3 days. We're going to move through. We broke up into teams, and essentially each apprentice burn boss was bossing a burn, and all the other burn bosses were crew on that burn. And then we just kept rotating through until everybody got their 3 burns. And I think it took about 2.5 days to get all these done. And so essentially we met at Shaker Village the evening before the burn window, discussed assignments, then started burning the next day. And we moved through as many units again as possible. And then Shaker Village provided free rooms, breakfast, and dinner for the duration of the burn, because we were essentially on there burning their property off. And again, during that year in 2025, we had 20 approved apprentice burn bosses to go full certified burn boss, and 7 of those were non-agency folks, by far and away the most we ever had in any one year. And I don't know if I have any questions or concerns or questions or comments, but yeah, find me later if I don't. Thanks so much.